Welcome to Spidell's California Minute. I'm your host, Catherine Zidane. This week we're covering what constitutes a superseding return for the purposes of making or revoking a pass-through entity tax election. Master California's tax minefields like conformity, residency, community property, and apportionment, plus get an update on other California tax issues at Spidell's 2-hour Critical California Tax Issues webinar on August 26th. Get a full list of topics and register at spidell.com under webinars. A taxpayer can only make a pass-through entity tax election on an original timely filed return. Once the election is made, it's irrevocable, and the taxpayer cannot make or revoke the election on an amended return. According to the FTB, taxpayers that failed to make a pass-through entity tax election can make the election on a superseding return. But the FTB's definition of a superseding return is much more restrictive than what many tax professionals understand it to be. Many tax professionals, as well as the IRS, define a superseding return to mean a return filed subsequent to an originally filed return and that's filed within the filing period, including extensions. The FTB has stated that a second return for a pass-through entity is only a superseding return if both the first and second returns were filed prior to the original due date of the return or after the original due date of the return but by the extended due date. If it meets these requirements, a superseding return is considered a replacement for the original return and is treated as if it were the original return, so the election could be made on the superseding return under these circumstances. The same reasoning would apply if an election was made on the first return but revoked on the subsequently filed return. If a return is a superseding return, the pass-through entity tax election can be made or revoked on that superseding return. According to the FTB, an amended return is a corrected return that is filed after the original due date when the first return is filed on or before the original due date. An amended return does not replace the original filing, and an election cannot be made or revoked on an amended return. On their pass-through entity tax FAQs page, the FTB has provided a chart with 5 scenarios that shows when the pass-through entity tax election would be considered made on a superseding return or when it would be considered made on an amended return. The FTB is paying attention to this distinction, and they're disallowing invalid elections, as we've seen in recent Office of Tax Appeals cases. In Appeal of Olson, a partner member of an LLC claimed a credit for his share of the pass-through entity elective tax paid by the LLC. But the partner didn't know that the LLC made the election on what they called a superseding return, rather than on an originally timely filed return, which in his case made the election invalid. The decision only states that the 2021 tax year superseding return was filed on September 6, 2022, but it doesn't indicate when the original return was filed. Presumably, it was filed before March 15, 2022, which would mean that the FTB would have treated the second filed return as an amended return rather than a superseding return, making the election on the second return invalid. The OTA held that the taxpayer's, quote, failure to adequately research and report the property items on his individual tax return does not shift the burden to FTB to notify the LLC or the appellant taxpayer that the PTE election was invalid, end quote. Tax professionals should keep in mind that both the pass-through entity and their individual owners have to determine whether the election is valid and the credit claimed on the return is accurate. Spidell's Summer Tax Update brings together the topics our customers consistently ask for so you get the information that's most relevant to your practice. For this year's topics and to register, go to spidell.com and click Webinars. That's all for this week. Join us next time for another episode of Spidell's California Minute.